At 10:45 in the morning, she sent her mother a text message. 4 words. "Mum, he's turned up." Her mother told her to go straight home. Molly gathered her things, left the gym floor, and walked to her car. She was doing exactly what she had been told to do. She had reported him to police. Not once, but twice. She had told her friends she was scared. She had told her mother everything. She had stayed connected to every person who could help her. She was following every instruction the system had given her. She never made it out of the car park. Molly McLaren was 23 years old. She was a student, a daughter, a friend, and a woman who had already survived one of the hardest battles of her life. She had done everything that victims of stalking and harassment are told to do. And on the morning of the 29th of June, 2017, in a public car park in Chatham, Kent, in broad daylight, it was not enough. This is her story, and it demands to be told in full. Welcome back to Cold Case Britain, the channel that goes beyond the headlines to understand what really happened, why it happened, and what it means. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button now. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from tonight. We have viewers joining us from across the UK, the US, Canada, Australia, and beyond. Let us see where the Cold Case Britain community is tuning in from now. Let us talk about Molly. Molly McLaren grew up in Cobham, a village in Kent, the kind of place that sits quietly in the English countryside, far enough from London to feel like a separate world, close enough that people commute in and out of city life without losing the sense of belonging to somewhere smaller and more particular. She was the daughter of Joanne, known to Molly as Jo, and Doug McLaren, and she had an older brother named Tom. By every account that survives her, she grew up in a close, warm, deeply connected family. The kind where you called your mum when you were frightened. The kind where, when a father received a phone call on a work site telling him his daughter was dead, he had to fly home to a house already full of people who had loved her. The people who knew Molly reached for the same words again and again. Bubbly, warm, sociable, open, full of energy. Her father, Doug, later said she loved festivals and parties. She was the kind of person who filled a room without trying, not through performance or self-consciousness, but through a genuine, unguarded delight in being around other people. Her mother, Jo, did not only describe Molly as her daughter, she described her as one of her closest friends. But behind that warmth, Molly had been fighting something private and difficult for years. She had struggled with bulimia for a significant portion of her adult life. Eating disorders are not simply about food. They live in the body and the mind simultaneously, reshaping how a person sees themselves, how they experience time, how they relate to the most basic acts of daily life. They rarely announce themselves to the outside world. Molly fought hers quietly for a long time before she decided to fight it differently. She enrolled at the University of Kent to study sport and exercise science. The choice was not accidental. She was using her education to build the intellectual and practical framework for her own recovery, understanding nutrition, movement, and how the body heals from the inside out. Her family later said she had been winning that battle, that the strategy was working. And then she went further. She went public with it. She wrote blog posts and online content about eating disorder recovery, sharing her experience openly because, as her close friend Amy Lee later described, Molly found real comfort in that honesty. She knew that somewhere out there, someone else was going through the same thing in silence. She wanted them to know that recovery was possible. She had been that person once. She did not want anyone else to stay there longer than necessary. Her grades were at distinction level. Her parents later collected a diploma on her behalf at Rochester Cathedral. They believed she would have graduated with a first-class honors degree had she been allowed to finish her final year. She was 23 years old. She had already survived one war with herself. She was building a future designed to help other people win theirs. She had no idea another war had already started. In 2016, Molly matched with Joshua Stimson on Tinder. He was 25 years old, a warehouse worker from Woodham near Rochester. When Molly brought him home to meet her family, her parents had no immediate concerns. Her father, Doug, later said there were, in his own words, no red flags. They welcomed Stimson as their daughter's boyfriend. He appeared intensely devoted. Jo McLaren later remembered him lying on Molly's bed, simply watching her. At the time, it looked like a young man in love. Looking back, after everything, she understood it entirely differently. Joe had one early concern. Stimson had told Molly he suffered from bipolar disorder. She worried quietly about what that might mean. But Molly reassured her. Of all people, Molly understood what it meant to carry a difficult mental health label. She believed they could understand and support each other through their separate struggles. She extended him the same compassion she had learned to extend to herself through her own recovery. That compassion would be exploited in the most calculated way. As the months passed, a pattern became visible, at least to Molly and those closest to her. She felt suffocated. Stimson always had to be present, on nights out with her friends while she studied, in every available corner of her daily life. Her friend Amy Lee would later testify in court that Molly told her she had no me time. He was not a boyfriend who simply loved spending time together. He was someone who appeared structurally unable to tolerate Molly existing as a separate person with her own space, her own thoughts, her own air. This dynamic was already coercive before any public harassment began. It was simply harder to name while it was still wearing the costume of devotion. Molly had also been helping him practically. She helped him secure a job at a company in Strood in May 2017. She was still looking after him even as he was slowly narrowing her world down around her. The relationship lasted around 7 months. On the 17th of June 2017, after a night out in Maidstone, Molly ended it. In the messages that followed, she told Stimson his behavior had become childish and pathetic. He was, by all court accounts, furious. He did not grieve quietly or withdraw. He escalated immediately, deliberately, and publicly. Within days of the breakup, Stimson began posting derogatory content and photographs about Molly on Facebook. He made false public claims that she had taken drugs. These were not random outbursts of grief. They were reputation attacks, targeted, intentional, designed to humiliate her publicly, to punish her for the act of leaving, and to keep himself forcibly present in her life after she had chosen to exit it. Molly reported the posts to police. She was frightened. She did not go to the police station alone. She went with her mother, Jo. An officer called Stimson while they were present and warned him, "Stop the behavior or face prosecution." His reported response, when told that they would not want Molly to have to come back to the station about him, was 3 words, "Wouldn't we?" Not contrition, not compliance, pure defiance. He was not arrested, he was warned, and he continued. Before we go further, did you know that the most dangerous moment in a controlling relationship is the moment you try to leave? That separation is statistically the highest risk period for victims of domestic abuse? Drop your answer in the comments because that fact is the entire context for what follows in this case. Molly told her friends she felt like she was always looking over her shoulder. She worried he might appear at her house. Her family became so concerned they gave photographs of Stimson to their neighbors and asked them to watch for him. 2 days before the murder, police spoke to him again. For the second time, he was not arrested. On that same day, 2 days before he killed her, Joshua Stimson walked into an Asda in Chatham and bought a kitchen knife. Within 30 minutes, he was in a nearby Homebase buying a pickaxe. He was not planning to cook. He was not doing home improvements. He was preparing. On the evening of the 28th of June, 2017, the night before the murder, Molly was out with friends. Joshua Stimson appeared uninvited at the same venue. Her friend Amy Lee later told the court that Molly was left physically shaking when she saw him. She had not expected him. She had not posted on social media about where she was going. She told Amy that police had already spoken to him, as though a warning from officers should have functioned as a wall he would not cross again. She was trying to make the situation make sense. She could not, because Stimson had no intention of stopping. She went home that night, she went to sleep, and when she woke up the next morning, she made a decision. She was not going to let fear take her life before he did. She got in her car and she drove to the gym. Pure Gym at the Dockside Retail Park in Chatham was a regular part of Molly's routine. For her, the gym was not simply about staying in shape. It had been part of her recovery, a place connected to healing, to the healthy relationship with her own body she had worked so hard to build after years of struggling with bulimia. It was supposed to be hers, a space that belonged to who she was becoming. Joshua Stimson also arrived at Pure Gym that morning. CCTV footage later captured him walking up and down the gym stairs before entering the fitness floor. He placed his exercise mat directly next to Molly's. He did not do this by accident. He did not choose that spot at random. He walked past every other available space and positioned himself next to her. At 10:45 in the morning, Molly sent the text to her mother. "Mum, he's turned up at the gym and come next to me." Joe told her to go straight home. Around 10:59, she also messaged Amy Lee. Stimson had appeared at the gym. Amy asked whether Molly had posted on Snapchat that she was going there. Molly said she had not posted anything. Then she said that the previous night and that morning were starting to look dodgy. She was working it out in real time, trying to understand how he knew where she was, whether he was tracking her movements through social media or through something else entirely. She was not confused. She was not in denial. She was thinking clearly about a man who was hunting her, and she was right. Inside the gym, Molly confronted him. She asked why he was not at work. He told her it was none of her business. Shortly before 11 in the morning, Molly gathered her things and left. She walked to her car in the dockside car park. She was going home. She was following every instruction she had ever been given. She did everything right, everything, and she walked to her car. Did you know about this case before today? Drop a comment below, because Molly's story deserves to be known far beyond the people who already know her name. Stimson had been waiting. He pulled his vehicle close to hers and got out with the engine still running. He attacked her inside her own car in a public car park in broad daylight. Molly McLaren suffered more than 75 stab wounds. A passerby named Benjamin Morton saw what was happening and ran toward the car. He tried to intervene. The attack was already too far underway. Emergency services responded. Molly died at the scene. When police arrested Stimson at the scene, he was calm. He reportedly told officers that Molly was in the car and that he had killed her. Inside his vehicle, officers found the murder weapon, 2 Stanley knives and a pickaxe, 4 weapons, 2 shopping trips, 2 days of planning. This was not a man who had snapped. This was a man who had arrived prepared for every possible outcome and had executed a plan he had been building since the moment she told him it was over. Joshua Stimson was tried at Maidstone Crown Court in early 2018. He admitted he had killed Molly. He denied murder. His plea was manslaughter by diminished responsibility, the legal argument that his mental state had substantially impaired his judgment and self-control at the time of the killing. His defense psychiatrist described him as emotionally unstable, hypersensitive to rejection, and shaped by the trauma of his mother leaving when he was a teenager. The prosecution psychiatrist, Dr. Philip Joseph, saw the same man and reached a different conclusion. Stimson had narcissistic traits, vain, immature, needy, constitutionally unable to prioritize another person's feelings, but no diagnosable personality disorder that would meet the legal threshold for diminished responsibility, and the killing was too deliberately planned to be explained away by any psychiatric framing. Planning requires intent. Intent is murder. The jury also heard from 2 former girlfriends. Alexandra Dale, who had dated Stimson in 2013, testified that he had followed her without her knowledge, taken secret photographs of her, warned her not to speak to other men, and once sent her a photograph of her own back garden before she had ever told him where she lived. Leah Hubble ended her relationship with him after he spat a drink on her, and later found him at her flat window at 2 in the morning asking to charge his phone. This testimony was not about character, it was about pattern. Proof that Molly was not the first woman Joshua Stimson had frightened, only the one he had a weapon prepared for when the escalation reached its final point. Stimson did not testify in his own defense. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. What time is it where you are right now? Let us know in the comments. And stay with us, because the legal outcome of this case is only the beginning of what needs to be said. On the 6th of February 2018, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty of murder. Judge Adele Williams sentenced Stimson to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 26 years. In her sentencing remarks, she used 3 words to describe the killing: cruel, calculated, cowardly. She said Stimson had deliberately ended Molly's life to punish her for leaving him. She said he was highly dangerous, that he posed a serious and continuing risk to women, and that he might never be released. Now we need to talk about what the verdict does not answer. After Molly's death, Kent Police referred itself to the Independent Police Complaints Commission. It emerged that officers had warned Stimson twice And the second warning had been delivered 2 days before he walked into Asda and bought the knife he would use to kill her. The warning came. The shopping trip came 30 minutes later. The police knew about him, and he knew that the police knowing about him carried no consequences he could not absorb. But the most painful detail to emerge in the aftermath was this. Other police forces had previously investigated Joshua Stimson for alleged aggressive behavior toward previous girlfriends. Alexandra Dale had experienced his surveillance, his control, his refusal to accept her as a separate person. Leah Hubble had experienced his intimidation. Those investigations had happened. That information existed. It had never been placed on a shared, accessible file. The officers handling Molly's reports were working without the full picture of who Joshua Stimson actually was to women who tried to leave him. A complete picture existed somewhere in the system. It never reached the people who needed it. And Molly McLaren walked into a gym and texted her mom and followed every instruction while the people responsible for her safety were working blind. Share this video right now if you have made it this far. Not for the algorithm, but because the gap between what Molly did and what happened to her anyway is the most important lesson this case carries. In January 2020, 2.5 years after Molly's murder, stalking protection orders were introduced in England and Wales. These orders allow courts to impose conditions on a stalker before any criminal conviction, at the earlier stage of identified risk. They were introduced in part because of cases like Molly's, cases where the escalation was documented, the danger was visible, and the existing legal tools were not being deployed quickly enough to interrupt the trajectory before it became fatal. In a 2022 interview with ITV News, Molly's parents gave an honest account of what their lives had become. Joe said she still struggled to leave the house. Doug described permanent damage to his ability to function in daily life. But in that same interview, they said something important about stalking protection orders. ITV had reported that only a small fraction of recorded stalking crimes had resulted in applications for those orders. Joe and Doug McLaren said that was not good enough. They called for better information sharing between police forces, for the legal tools that now existed to actually be used. The law had moved. The implementation had not kept pace. And that gap between legislation existing and legislation being applied is where the next Molly lives. But this story does not end in failure. It does not end in a courtroom or a parliamentary committee. It ends in part with Molly Fest. Molly's family created a festival around what would have been her 24th birthday because her father said she loved festivals, so they gave her one. People who loved her gathered. Her name was spoken in celebration, not just in grief. By 2022, the work connected to her name had helped fund evidence-based therapy and support for 18 individuals and families dealing with eating disorders, and had raised more than £73,000 for recovery services. Her diploma sits somewhere in her parents' home, collected at Rochester Cathedral by two people who should never have had to stand in her place. And Benjamin Morton, the stranger who ran toward the car in that Chatham car park instead of walking away, was later honored for his bravery by the High Sheriff of Kent. He could not save her, but he tried. He ran toward the danger rather than away from it. That matters. He belongs in this story. Molly McLaren had already won one war. She had fought something private and consuming, and she had come out the other side. She had turned that survival into advocacy. She had used her own experience to reach people she had never met and tell them that recovery was possible. She was 23 years old with distinction-level grades and a future built around helping other people heal. She was killed because a man she chose to leave refused to accept that choice. She was killed despite reporting him, despite telling everyone around her she was scared, despite doing everything she was told to do. And she was killed while a system that should have protected her treated documented, escalating, multi-force danger as a matter of warnings rather than action. The judge said Stimson might never be released. He will not be eligible for parole consideration until he is in his early 50s at the absolute earliest. Whether he is ever released will depend on whether the parole board believes he is safe. Given that Judge Williams described him as posing a serious and continuing risk to women, that is not a threshold he will cross easily. But the question this case leaves behind is not about him. It is about the next woman who reports a man twice and is still left without adequate protection. It is about the next police force that handles a case without access to information sitting in a system somewhere that would change everything about how they respond. It is about the gap between what we tell victims to do and what we actually do to keep them safe once they have done it. Molly did everything right. That has to mean something. It has to lead somewhere. And the only way it does is if enough people understand what happened to her and demand better from the systems built in her name. If this video moved you, if it made you think about someone you know, about the warning signs that get minimized, about the courage it takes to leave, and the failure that can follow, subscribe to Cold Case Britain so you do not miss what comes next. Share this video, leave a comment, because every person who hears Molly's name is another person who understands what documented escalation looks like and what must happen when we see it. There is a psychological dimension to this case that deserves to be named precisely because it explains everything that followed the breakup. Joshua Stimson did not experience Molly's decision to end the relationship as a loss. He experienced it as a theft. In his internal architecture, Molly was not a person who had made a choice about her own life. She was something he owned, a territory whose borders she had violated by walking out. That distinction matters because it explains why his response was not grief or withdrawal or the ordinary painful process of heartbreak. It was a punishment campaign. Every Facebook post, every false allegation, every uninvited appearance at a venue she was at, every moment of positioning himself next to her in a gym. These were not the acts of a broken-hearted man. They were the acts of a man prosecuting a case against someone who had dared to take back something he believed belonged to him. The clinical term for this pattern is coercive control, and in England and Wales it became a criminal offense in 2015 under the Serious Crime Act. 2 years before Molly was killed, the law existed, the language existed, the documentation of Stimson's behavior existed. What did not exist was a mechanism fast enough, connected enough, and assertive enough to interrupt a man who had already decided that consequences were a price he was willing to pay. Molly's blog posts about eating disorder recovery still exist somewhere online, written by a 23-year-old woman who had decided that her private pain was worth sharing if it meant one other person felt less alone. That is not a small thing. That is an act of genuine courage, the decision to make your own wound visible so that someone else does not have to bleed in silence. She was doing that at the same time she was being hunted, writing about healing and hope and recovery while a man was shopping for weapons 2 towns over. Both of those things were true at the same time. And that is who Molly McLaren was. Rest in peace, Molly. You had already won one war. You deserve to win this one too.